Hey Queers Zine Fest! My name is Catherine Learn, and today I'm running a workshop on how to run an effective call for submissions. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you so much for your time, and hopefully you'll learn how I've run an effective call for submissions and learn more about my experience working with national security laws in Hong Kong, censorship rules, how to navigate it, and a little bit more about my experience. Before we start, my name is Catherine Learn. My last name is pronounced Learn as in learning. My pronouns are she, her. By day, I am an elementary school teacher in Vermont. By night, I make zines, I research, I write, I make art, I paint. And I feel like zines really let you do all those things at once. And so the zine I'm talking mostly about today is Canto Cutie Zine. You can follow us on Instagram or go on my website, cantocutie.com. There you can read my first 3 volumes of the zine completely for free. And you can also purchase physical copies of the zine. We often do discounts, promotions, we support our artists that we publish. So please give us a follow, I would love that. So for today's talk, you can follow along on the presentation at that URL. I'm the kind of listener that prefers to look at the slides while the teacher's talking. And if you're that type of person, awesome. Here's the URL if you want to go back and look at anything I said. So here are 2 zines that I currently run. The first zine I started was Dead Dad's Club. I made that one in 2018, and so far there have been 2 volumes of Dead Dad's Club. It is a zine that I printed off at work illegally. I made it on Microsoft Word, and it started because I wanted to find some kind of art or literature about the loss of a father, since my dad died about 8 years ago, but that didn't pertain to therapy or, about the grief and trauma, like trying to overcome it. Like, why can't there just be art or writing about this topic, but not devoted to helping you, getting you self-help? I was wondering where that was, and so that's kind of how that idea came to be. And I'll talk about a little bit how I ran a call for submissions for that zine, and how my success working with that zine really birthed the idea for Canto Cutie, which is an art and literature zine about the Cantonese diaspora. I'll talk a lot more about that today. We have published 3 volumes of Canto Cutie. They come out 2 times a year, mostly in the winter and one in the summer. We just released volume 3. So why art and literature zines? So as an artist and as a writer, I found that there were many opportunities that I wanted to be published. Many times I wanted my voice to be heard or wanted to be among a group of artists that was being represented at a gallery or a publication. And I found that often my art did not fit into those publications. A lot of publications had really strict rules, like there can only be a certain amount of words, it can't be over. Or I found that maybe my art was too sexual, too political, or like Dead Dad's Club, about a topic just too vulnerable, people don't want to deal with it. So as an artist and a writer, I found that, this space I'm looking for, it doesn't really exist yet. I also found that applying for publications, it was expensive. As a public school teacher, that's money that I can't really throw away, not knowing if I will get accepted or not into a certain publication. So there are fees just to submit. Fees where if you do get accepted, there's hanging fees. And I understand that, you have to pay artists and you have to pay curators for their work, but it's even harder to break in, I feel like, when you're just starting out. And another thing I saw a lot was that, say I did get accepted and say I did get published, I found that publications did not always honor my work. Sometimes they were incorrectly formatted. Maybe my art was upside down. That happened once at a gallery, not good. Maybe my name would be misspelled. Maybe the titles or the dimensions would be wrong. But I also found, other than like aesthetically, I found that sometimes publications didn't have like pride in your work. They weren't promoting you. They weren't advertising you. They just wanted to, publish in the end. We're just going to put this book, this publication into a drawer and forget about it. And I didn't like that. I felt disappointed a lot. I think a lot of artists know exactly what I'm talking about, where it's like, awesome, I got published for the first time. This is so awesome. This is so prestigious. Like, I've worked so hard for this. But then, like, the outlet, it didn't match your expectations. You thought you'd get, like, you'd feel like a star and you'd feel like, important to that organization. And so I found that, that feeling doesn't get reciprocated, and it is disappointing. And so with my publication, Canto Cutie, I really tried to change that. And lastly, the reason why I created Canto Cutie and continue to work so hard on it and keep it going is because as an artist and a writer, I was looking for outlets that did not exist. There was nothing that I could find easily about Cantonese culture specifically. There might be publications for Asian Americans, but all the AAPI identity is so vast, so different, so diverse, so many different identities that I don't even feel like, just falling under that umbrella. And those publications, they might, serve mostly, upper middle class East Asians. They might serve mostly a certain group or a certain country. And I was interested in, what about, Cantonese people who aren't American, or Cantonese people that don't speak Cantonese, or, Cantonese people who don't belong in Hong Kong or in America. Like, where do they fit? And so that's why I started Canto Cutie. So for those who don't know, Cantonese is a language, a linguistic minority, and an ethnic minority out of South China and Hong Kong. Some New York City and San Francisco Chinatowns were created and originally founded by Cantonese immigrants. Usually if someone says they're from Hong Kong or South China, from the Guangdong province, usually they identify as a Cantonese speaker, but the identity is really diverse. So some people, they might speak Cantonese, but not identify as Cantonese. Some people might be from Hong Kong, but maybe more identify as Chinese. And in the last 10 years, it has become a really politicized identity. Hong Kong was a British colony until the 90s, and there were certain agreements to hand Hong Kong back to China, and there were certain things that really affected our identity in the modern day. So it's become kind of radicalized to call yourself Cantonese. And as an American that grew up in the US, but going to Hong Kong to see my family, associating dim sum and Cantonese food with my culture, speaking it with my family and the community I grew up in, I really associate more with Cantonese culture rather than Hong Kong culture, which I feel like is the culture of my parents who are from Hong Kong. And just for the record, China has over 50 languages and ethnic groups. So sometimes when someone just says like they're Chinese, really they might mean that they're from another minority group within China, or they might identify with like the country, the geopolitical entity, rather than, the linguistic minority. I'll talk a little more about that later. So, what is my experience working with zines? So, the first time I made any kind of publication was in high school, back in 2007, I think. I worked on a high school newspaper, and I worked with InDesign, and I just remember having the experience that it was really difficult, really clunky, never formally got taught. They just threw us in there and said, make the school newspaper. And now that I'm an educator, I've wanted to take that back and make that experience more approachable to kids. So I've worked in Title I schools, I've worked in schools, in urban schools, and I've helped curate a literary and art journal for elementary schoolers with student editors who decide everything, where I work as a facilitator. We used Google Sheets because that's kind of the landscape that they're really familiar with and that they will continue to use in middle school and high school. And so I know that some people, they might feel like that certain programs, this is publishing, we must use Adobe products, or they might have some kind of opinion on that. But I feel like zines, something that's so awesome about that is because this is open to all kinds of publication ideas and possibilities, and that, making something on Google Sheets, Google Slides, and then just printing it out, it's totally doable. And any way that you can put self-publishing and independent publishing in the hands of kids, it's really powerful. And like I said before, getting rejected 100 times by publications, it made me want to make my own zine. So I'm going to talk more about my experience curating and creating Dead Dad's Club. So it is a zine that runs on calls for submissions. I ran calls for submissions through the California Arts Council. I found that really effective because not just Californians use it. I think artists all around the world just go there because, it's a really good resource. And I also use Instagram. There are lots of call for art accounts that posts open calls for art. And so a lot of those accounts, they will just happily post your stuff for free. What I like to do, but I don't recommend for everyone, is that I review art as it comes in. I don't like to wait until it all comes in on the deadline and then I look at it, because if someone has a question, I want to answer them right away. I don't want to make a big job for me to do in 2 months. That gets daunting, that gets stressful to think about. I like to review them as they come along. I like to start thinking about what are the themes that are arising out of that work that's being submitted. And I try to cast a wide net. So I reach out to artists and writers. There are art websites that writers never go to. There are writing websites that artists never touch. And so in order to cast a wider net, to present your opportunity to as many people as you can, you have to put your publication out there. So my first Dead Dad's Club was created in Microsoft Word, and I provided a free copy to all the contributors. Since then, I've started professionally printing it with a few different websites. And Dead Dad's Club, you can now buy it at Quimby's in New York, Wasted Ink in Phoenix, Blue Stockings in New York, in Australia. We're in zine libraries, we're in public libraries, and we've been a part of a lot of zine festivals. And the reason I participate in all this stuff isn't just to, support myself. It's to get the work of the artists and the writers exposed to as many of their readers. It always feels so good when someone, starts following a new artist or reaches out to a writer saying, hey, I read your stuff in Dead Dad's Club. Yeah, I found it at Quimby's. And it's like, I don't know that person, and they're just like creating this relationship. I think nothing is better than that. And I think zines really do that really well because the reader, they know they're reading the work. They're looking at the artwork of a real artist that's like, that's putting themselves out there. And I think people who do submit to zines, they understand that it's like, this is not like professional, our traditional sense of what professional publishing is like. It's really open, and that's what I love about zines. Here are just two of the works that were in our first volume of Dead Dad's Club. We had oil paintings, block printing, we had photography, we had poetry, essays, short stories. So now I'm going to talk more about Canto Cutie, a zine I started a year after I started Dead Dad's Club, when I saw that my first volume was successful, when I was like, wow, this is fun, I can do this at a larger scale. This meant so much to the artists and the writers. Hey, it's kind of fun to promote these people on Instagram. So I wanted to kind of kick it up a notch. So that's when I started Canto Cutie. Canto Cutie, I felt like the interest would be larger as, Cantonese is an identity. It's not like Dead Dad's Club where it's like, it's a thing you can talk about and some people can, and, it feels a little bit more niche. Canto Cutie is, I would say, larger and there's more interest. With Canto Cutie, I get a lot more submissions, at least 100 for volume 2 and 3 of the submissions I received. They're a lot larger. These zines are over 100 pages. They're in color. They're edited by multiple people, and there's more production value. I started using a professional printer at that time to make sure that the quality was tip-top, that artists and writers who submitted would be happy with how their art was presented. And with Canto Cutie, there's an international audience. So it's not just Cantonese people in America, it's all around the world. So knowing that I'm representing the diaspora to whoever, wherever, any kind of store, person, artist, writer, I had to think about what should it look like if it's going to be internationally shipped, if it's going to be read in many languages. So for the first 2 issues, I used Swift Publisher. That is a program just for Macs, similar to InDesign. It's from a really indie and really awesome company called Beelight Software. I really recommend Swift Publisher. If you, I think, are a teacher, you can get a discount on it, but the program itself is affordable. It is $20 and I think $13 if you're a teacher. But then I lost my Mac and I had to switch to PC. I started using Affinity Publisher, and Affinity is pretty affordable too. I think it is less than $30. So Swift Publisher, amazing program that I started using on Macs. Affinity, I have just created volume 3 with Affinity Publisher. You can take a peek at volume 1, 2, and 3 on my site, cantocutie.com, and you can see how the style changes a little bit for volume 3. But I think the learning curve for both of them are really similar, and I would say both are very easy to use, much easier than InDesign. I also tried Scribus, which is another indie program that they have on Linux, but also on Mac and PC. I found that kind of hard to figure out. I don't know why. That's just my experience. And with Canto Cutie zines, I use professional printers, and they are not saddle bound, they're perfect bound with mixem.com, and that's a website I highly recommend. So here are some artworks from Volume 1 of Canto Cutie. For Volume 1, since it was the first volume, I had to reach out personally to artists, which meant talking to my friends, family, meeting strangers, reaching out to people on Instagram, being like, hey, I loved your work. Do you want to be the cover? And so with the success with that, I was able to make Volume 2 and 3 without having to reach out and really chase down artists and writers. But that's fun too. Matthew Lee is an artist that I actually know in real life, which is really exciting because I got to ask him, hey, I know you're an artist. Do you want to be in this publication, the first issue ever? So I know it was a big step, a big leap. Elaine Chu is an artist I found on Instagram. She creates, she's this urban sketcher in Hong Kong, and she likes to document the old style signs that are really iconic to Hong Kong's history. And in the previous slide, that's ZCam, the cover artist for Volume 1, an artist that I reached out to on Instagram, and now this artist helps me edit and translate and have talked and spoken at our launch parties. So really, zines are the perfect vehicle for friendship. Let me just say that. Okay, so the main topic of today is navigating national security laws, and so I want to talk more about that in Hong Kong. So the national security law came into effect on June 30th, 2020. This is the 23rd anniversary of the city's handover to China from British rule. As I mentioned before, Hong Kongers have a really conflicted identity. Some of them feel like, yes, I am British, I'm a product of colonization. They might have a more positive connotation with that. And I know, my parents, they were educated in English, they were given opportunities. Hong Kong and its role as a port city, there's kind of a lot of nuance to that kind of relationship and that kind of upbringing. Whereas some Hong Kongers, they relate more with where they are from. Some relate to, China. And so this law gave Beijing powers to shape life in Hong Kong as it has never before. So if you want to read this article in the BBC, it explains more about the law, and I will explain more too. So this law has 66 articles, and weirdly, they were kept secret until after it was passed, and it criminalizes secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign or external forces. So you're probably thinking, what? Like, this is a zine about art and literature. Like, what does this have to do with any of that? But as I mentioned before, some people in Hong Kong, they feel, more affinity to their Hong Kong identity. They relate more to being a Hong Konger, not a Chinese person, not part of China. There are Hong Kongers who are actively fighting it. As you've probably heard, there are pro-democracy protests all last summer, and that was in reaction to this new law. And so with Canto Cutie zine, we don't really take on, strong government or political stances, but the fact that we do think that Cantonese is a separate language from Chinese, the fact that we do think Cantonese is an identity that's worth talking about. Some might see it as subversion, undermining the power or authority of the central government, because we are somewhat implying that we are different than China, than Beijing, that our homeland, Hong Kong, that it's somehow, just different. And like I said, we don't take strong political stances. There are some artwork and there are some things in the zine that suggest it, and I'll talk more about how the waters get muddy. So another idea is that Hong Kong, maybe that it should return to British rule, or that it should continue being self-governed. It was a semi-autonomous region for 20 years. Why can't we keep doing that? That's a popular stance too. So having this kind of idea or promoting this with your free speech, could also be identified as secession, that you're suggesting that it should break away from China. And so that has become really controversial overnight. So here is a little bit more information from the BBC article about more specifics about what this national security law meant. But basically, it's that if you're accused of any of those things I've listed before, there's a maximum sentence of life in prison. This doesn't just apply to people, this applies to companies as a whole. Many companies have been fined, many companies have left Hong Kong. This kind of arisen last summer, 2020, because of some cases that they were unsure which court to be tried in. I won't talk about that because my zine's mostly about art and literature, but if you're interested, there's a lot of reading you can do, and that this situation changes every day. There's developments every day, and that to a lot of Hong Kongers and a lot of people in the Cantonese diaspora, it means that our autonomy, our freedom, it is changing, and a new kind of surveillance regime might be starting, or might have started. So it's a scary time for a lot of people in the diaspora. A lot of people have left Hong Kong. And the last bullet point I want to point out, that this also applies to people who aren't even in Hong Kong, who aren't in China. So, that's confusing too. So a lot of the law, like I mentioned, was secret. And now that it's here, there's a lot that isn't known and is very uncomfortable and confusing, because this law has a huge effect on a lot of people in the diaspora. Some trials will be heard behind closed doors. That's a little scary. So yes, I recommend, if you want to learn more, if you want to learn exactly what the law says, what exactly are the effects, how other courts and how international court has interpreted this, please read that. That's a great review from the Georgetown Law. That also means, or recent developments, it means certain slogans are not allowed. For example, in this picture, this is a protest slogan from the democracy protest last year. And, now it has become illegal to post this and have this written anywhere. So I will explain more about this slogan in a bit and how that pertains to Canto Cutie. So some more ways that this national security law pertains to Canto Cutie is in Article 29 out of the 66 articles. Like I said, people who are outside of mainland China, people who are outside of Hong Kong, they can still get in trouble. We are an American-based zine. We will always be based in the U.S., but there's a lot of worry for artists and writers in Hong Kong who may be submitting, and they may be afraid to be accused of conspiring with a foreign country. And I want to iterate again that my zine doesn't take a strong political stance on anything, but we do suggest that, Cantonese identity, which is what I've felt my whole life, it's the only identity I know that suggesting that this identity is different than Chinese, yes, you can get in trouble for that. If you suggest that Hong Kong is somehow different from China, that it's somehow separate in any way, not trying to break away, not trying to, make any strong stance, but just suggesting that, yeah, we're different. There's things that we can explore in our art and literature about this. Yes, this puts all our artists in danger. So, when my first volume 1, came out, when this law got released, we had not published yet. I reached out to artists in Hong Kong and I asked them, are they comfortable? What do they think? Like, this is an American zine, like America-based zine, but it's gonna be free. What do you think? There were artists that dropped out and did not want to be a part of it. And I completely understand that. And that's a really difficult situation to have to deal with, especially, in 2021. You think that, we're just making art and writing, about our identity. That's just exploring who we are. And so, yeah, it gets really sticky for submitters, especially in Hong Kong. So I ran a call for submissions for volume 2, and I knew that the law had been out for about 5 months, and I knew there were fears from the artists and writers. People did not want to break the law or openly share anti-CCP things. Like, if that was being published in the zine, some people would not want to be a part of it. So even if the word CCP, Chinese Communist Party, is never mentioned in the zine, there are people who don't want to be associated with that, just by nature that our name is Canto Cutie. Dual Hong Kong and foreign citizens may not want to say something that would affect their ability to travel back to Hong Kong. And that's a really scary reality that, getting published in a zine, your painting, that it could have such a big say. So I understand that too. A lot of Hong Kongers, they're currently in limbo about their immigration and residency status. There are Hong Kongers who have already applied for other citizenships. They might have dual citizenship. And so with the new passage of the law, it makes all of that a little bit more confusing for them too. A lot more is in limbo, whereas in the past we've had the privilege to, Hong Kongers have been able to apply for dual citizenship. It's pretty open borders, and so a lot of that has changed. And like I said, the zine has a clear narrative that Cantonese is a separate identity from mainland China. And so while this is not specifically illegal, the language and the national security law really strongly implies that it is. Like I said, my zine never suggests, and no writer or artist ever suggests that Hong Kong needs to break away or succeed in any way. But like I said, this is a sensitive topic for a lot of people of the Sino diaspora. If you are interested in learning more about these issues, you can look into how modern Taiwan diaspora identifies problems that Taiwan government faces, the Taiwanese parliament, how they navigate being their own country but not, and there's a lot of things that have come to light over the years, especially as this issue with Hong Kong returning to China has been discussed. So there's also similar kind of drama with Turkestan and the Uyghurs, as you might have heard, that again, that there are these ethnic groups that, our numbers grow. Some of them grow in autonomy. Some of them want to identify differently. Some of them, it's confusing because we have a big diaspora all around the world. China is very diverse. It is by no means a monolith. There's over 50 other groups many, many languages, and it just seems like as these smaller groups, like Cantonese, just kind of grow in realization, and the diaspora grows, and the diaspora learns more, and the diaspora gets more politically active, and the diaspora starts creating art and learning more, that this has become a really radicalized topic, and it really shouldn't be. So what I did for volume 2 was I started running blind submissions. So I wasn't really reviewing submissions based on where artists were from, trying to give everyone just a fair chance. And I also started doing calls for submission bilingually. So that means I have all the text in English and in Chinese. I had a professional translator working with me, making sure that we are very clear on the terms. We value safety above all. If you don't want to be published anymore, let me know. If you don't want your name on the zine, if there's anything you want that we can do to protect your identity, I made it very clear in the calls for submissions, and made it very clear by making it bilingual. So by volume 3, I had tweaked the process a little, so I continue to do stuff in Chinese and English. I allow anonymity, so that's stated up front, like, hey, you don't want to say your name, you don't have to. You don't want to give an email, that's okay. I also have a box that submitters may check, saying that, up front, like telling me if they are comfortable with these specific phrases or politically sensitive artwork, or if they are not comfortable with it, and completely respecting their decisions for what they put. It's totally blows my mind that, again, in 2001, that this, in our world, that this is something we have to talk about and think about, but it's the reality for many artists and writers around the world. And it's very important to protect them. And if you are going to use your platform for good, if you are going to use your platform to raise awareness, to value safety above all. And I promise my artists and writers, and I promise for the future, that I will always be printing in the US. I don't know if the political situation will change in the US, but a lot of our writers and artists who live abroad, they feel comfortable knowing that a Chinese publishing house will not ever get hold of their information to change, to censor, that I will continue to support and distribute and to acknowledge their work, at least here in the US. So I'm going to show you what a call for submission looks like. I usually do it on Google Forms. I know there are many, many other platforms, and I know Google's not always the safest, but that's what I've been using so far. Hopefully that maybe the partnership with Google and China doesn't change in the future, but if it does, I'm open to adapting it. I always set deadlines, stick to them. I like to say, like, you're going to hear by this date about the decision. The zine will be released by this date. I begin creating spreads while submissions trickle in. So thinking about themes that arise as work comes in, like, oh, there's a lot of stuff about food this volume. Or, oh, a lot of people are exploring, gender fluidity in this issue. So just noticing that and seeing if I can make any moves on finding feature artists to interview. And my advice when making zines is always reach out to your friends first. Like, yes, it's totally fun to do an open call, and I really recommend it, but reach out to your friends first. Ask previous submitters if they want to be featured in an interview. I know that usually if someone has submitted work, if they've been published, they like it, they feel good about it, they feel supported and represented, they feel like you respectfully like provided a platform for them, they'll want to be in an interview and they'll want to tell you more. And, they already have, a positive connotation with your zine, and knowing that, you're doing a good job. You handle stuff all right. They'll want to talk to you. I always have a question where I ask submitters if they want to be featured in an interview. Again, some people, they just want to give you their painting and they're done. And I feel good about that. And some artists, they don't feel like they're still emerging artists. They have a lot to share. They want to talk. So that's why I asked them if they want to be featured in an interview. And I asked submitters where they heard about the call. Most of my submitters hear about it from Instagram, but yes, I've used websites like Call for Art and different Instagrams to promote my open call. And as I go through the process, I'm thinking about what can I do to keep it equitable. So I'm always thinking about that. I know there are many ways I can continue on that path, but I feel like making it bilingual and working with a translator was a huge step for us. Keeping it free, I will always have free submissions. That even if I get 1,000 submissions, I will keep it free. I know that's more work for me. I don't believe in requiring people to pay, and keep it fun. And I guess the golden rule is be the zine you wish you could apply to. Imagine you're the person filling out the form. Like, what questions would you want them to ask? What questions would make it easier? I know some forms, they make you write extra stuff and how it relates to the theme and blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, that can be done, but as the curator and as the person who's putting the zine together, it's kind of your job to see how that work can relate to your theme. They shouldn't be like begging you and like trying to convince you that their art or writing relates to your theme. So I don't really like to do that. So I try to be the zine I wish I could apply to. So that concludes my talk, and I just want to thank you so much for your time. I had a lot of fun talking about how to run an effective call for submissions, talking a little bit about Hong Kong's national security law. I know it's a really specific case with Cantonese identity in Hong Kong, but I have no doubt that this topic will be important to many people in the future. And please, if you are interested, to follow us on our website or on Instagram. We will always post our future calls. I repost almost anything of ours that gets posted. I try to keep an open communication, frequent posts, lots of contact with the writers and the artists that submit, a lot of their promotion. I try to promote them as much as I can, but I'm one person. This isn't, my full-time job. I mean, I would love for it to be. I love working on my zine, and we're always looking for more work. Any work that deals with identity, family, generation, trauma, longing, code switching, travel stereotypes. Basically anything an ethnic diaspora would talk about or face. That's something that I want to publish in the zine, and I want to provide a platform for people who have an opinion, who have a voice on that. I have put my email if you want to continue this conversation, and my personal website if you're interested in anything else that I do. But CantoCutie.com gets updated pretty much like every 2 days. We participate in a Zine Fest and a lot of different events. There are always promotions going on. So I pack orders every day. So if you're interested in physical copies, or just talk to me about anything you'd like. I believe by the time this workshop will be released, we would have already had our Volume 3 launch, which means that you can read the zine for free on our website, our 3rd volume. I'm really excited about that. Our unofficial title for it is The Food Issue. There's a lot of, I guess maybe the food and aquatic issue. There's a lot of works that deal with cuisine, gastronomy, how food impacts identity, and also about, the fact that Hong Kong is an island and how the biome, the ecological landscape really shapes a lot of our identity. So I invite anyone to read it for free on our website. The copy is done by an artist named Addie Hu, that you can find their work on our Instagram. And thank you so much for your time. And I hope you have fun for the rest of Queer Zest Theme Fest. Bye!